Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today we are talking about new numbers out of China that point to Tesla having a record quarter in the country. We've also got a couple of updates on Cybertruck and Giga Texas, some other research that has been recently published, and more. Not a whole lot going on with the stock. Tesla today down 1.4% to close at $189.19, while the Nasdaq was down 0.5% on the day. As we had talked about last week, this morning we did get the consumer confidence report. So kind of interesting to check in on that given everything that has happened in the banking sector. But consumer confidence actually did increase a little bit, the index increasing to 104.2 from 103.4 in February, despite the banking collapses that also happened during this period. Consumers' inflation expectations, which is something we know Fed Chairman Jerome Powell keeps a pretty close eye on, those did increase as well, the 12-month expectations going from 6.2% last month to 6.3% in the most recent survey. So just a couple of data points, obviously, but those things coming in stronger will lean a little bit more towards the hawkish or higher rate type of an environment. All right, let's move on to China. We do have another week of China insured vehicle numbers. This is for the week of March 20th through March 26th, or the 12th week of the quarter. And during this week, there were 15,886 vehicles insured in China. This is down a little bit week over week, about 18.7 thousand last week. So first time in the last 5 weeks that we have seen a week over week decline, which might be a little bit disappointing since we still have a few days before the end of the quarter. And if all of Tesla's Giga Shanghai production right now is going into China, which we seem to have been on a delivery wave, so that's a possibility, there should be enough supply for this to push up towards something like 20,000 per week, maybe even a little bit more. So this does leave an open question on what the constraint for a higher number is, and that will influence thinking going forward. But obviously there are a lot of possible constraints, not just demand, there are logistics, there's allocation, could even be supply if Tesla isn't at peak production rates, although they seem to be there recently. Now it's also tempting to look at last quarter and say, oh, it's normal for Tesla to taper off towards the end of the quarter. But remember, last quarter did have production downtime in late December, and then Tesla also dropped prices following that quarter, so I'm not sure that's the best one to look to point to this being normal for Tesla. Now, all that being said, it probably sounds like I'm painting this as a bad number. I'm not. I would have hoped for higher. Just trying to point out some of the unknowns that this leaves us with. But in any case, this number being above 15,000, this likely means that Tesla has set a record already, even with a few days left, for deliveries in China for a single quarter. This puts the insured vehicle count for the first 12 weeks of the quarter at 122,700 vehicles. That's higher than the entirety of the insured vehicle count over the full 13 weeks of last quarter. That was about 121,000. If we just look at the quarter-to-date comparison, so the first 12 weeks of each quarter as we have been doing, that comparison now shows Tesla up 5% quarter-to-date. Remember last week the same comparison was down 1%. So this number does give us a lot of confidence in how the quarter is going to come in. It should be a record quarter, and with a few days left in the quarter still, my best guess is that this trend that we're seeing quarter-to-date continues to improve, and we end the quarter up around 8% or so. Remember, that is despite the significant disruption that Chinese New Year presents every year in Q1, despite new energy vehicle incentive reductions at the end of the year 2022, and despite a tough auto market in China right now in general, which, if we look at BYD's numbers, we can see very much on display. So this week for BYD, their number did improve week over week up to 43,500 vehicles. That's their best number of the quarter so far, but at the same time, that only moves their quarter-to-date trend up from down 21% last week now to down 20%. So they're about 100,000 vehicles behind quarter to date. They'd need to do like 150,000 the next week just to get to flat, and that's obviously not going to happen. So where Tesla probably up about 8% sequentially, BYD probably down about 20% sequentially, or about a 30-point spread between the two. And mix-wise, we'll have to see, but from the numbers we have seen in January and February, BYD's more expensive vehicles probably seeing even greater declines. So obviously we'll see this weekend how worldwide numbers shake out for Tesla, and then we'll continue to get more data out of China specifically, and we'll loop back around and see how that all eventually comes in. All right, next up we've got another new video of the Cybertruck. This was shared by Ryan over at the Kilowatts. Shows the Cybertruck driving around Palo Alto and doing some interesting steering maneuvers and showing off some of the rear wheel steering that we expect the Cybertruck to have. Elon replied to the video saying that a Cybertruck might perhaps be better than a Model Y in turning. From this video, that definitely looks like a possibility, let alone a comparison to something like a Model X. So as if we needed another reason to be excited about the Cybertruck, there we go. Next, we've got an exciting update on Giga Texas. Joe Tagmeyer, who does drone flyover videos there and follows the site closely, has spotted that Tesla has filed for some expansion plans for Giga Texas with the city of Austin. So there's 2 permits here, and Joe outlines his expectations based off of these permits. The first is for East Support Facilities. This is 100 acres, so a small part of the land that Tesla has for Giga Texas, but relative to the current factory, this is a big area. And the description says that this is going to be for parking lots for passenger vehicles and trucks and trailers. So it's a huge lot. We'll see if Tesla has anything else planned for there, but the other permit is for a south end extension. This seems to extend the water and other infrastructure beneath the factory on the south end a little bit further, which looks like it might allow the factory length to extend by another 10-15% or so. I'll be curious to see how that develops. It might throw off the centering of the Tesla logo on the top of the building with the solar panels, so that kind of suggests a deviation from the original plans, but we'll have to see. Next up, we've got another NHTSA quote-unquote investigation into Tesla, as we've talked about on many occasions before. That usually refers to a preliminary evaluation. Oftentimes those are sorted out with the automakers and it doesn't rise to any further level. In this case, the investigation is regarding 2 complaints that NHTSA has received from Model X owners, reporting a failure of the front seatbelt to remain connected to the seatbelt anchor pre-tensioner. So obviously that could be a serious issue worth figuring out how widespread that might be, what the root cause of it is, and how to avoid that going forward. But as always, this is a part of the auto business. All manufacturers have things like this that pop up, but these things don't get any attention outside of Tesla. So at any rate, hopefully they figure that out and resolve that going forward. There have not been any accidents or injuries related to this so far. Next up, Cox Automotive, a company that has a lot of ties throughout the auto industry, has published their insights and forecasts for the first quarter in the auto industry. Perhaps the most interesting thing to us is their estimates regarding Tesla for the first quarter. Now, obviously these are estimates, but they do have a lot of data that they work off of. And if we ignore the circles that they made on this for a second, we can see that for Tesla, they expect a 40% increase in US vehicle sales over the first quarter last year and a 38% increase over Q4. Obviously, that means they are estimating a record quarter in the United States for Tesla by a significant margin. They also say that that would push Tesla's market share to 5% in the US for the first time ever. Although Tesla has already achieved this in prior quarters, they also note that that would put Tesla as the top luxury vehicle seller in the US. If you want to characterize them that way, probably premium is more fair, but that would be more than double the sales of BMW or Mercedes. So we'll get a better idea later this week of how accurate this is, but good to see that at this point, this is what their data is suggesting. All right, next up, we've got a kind of interesting article that was passed along to me by a listener. This is from defensenews.com, talking about some comments from the chief scientist of the Air Force regarding some of their objectives around autonomous flying systems and things of that nature, which would be a separate topic. But as far as it relates to Tesla, said, quote, "Self-driving cars didn't go from fully manually to fully automated. The Tesla vehicles and other electric vehicles, they've traveled millions or billions of miles where they learned and figured out how to interface with a human operator and to do so safely and securely. We don't get to skip that part in the Air Force," end quote. So obviously Tesla's approach gets a lot of criticism. Kind of good to see a comment here from the chief scientist of the Air Force talking about how their approach has been effective, even if it is just kind of a comment that was made in passing. It's also kind of interesting just to think about the implications down the road for things that might need a lot of testing and data collection and refinement. Well, Tesla is pretty well positioned to do that kind of work. Next up, we've got some insights from Recurrent. They've got about 15,000 EVs in their database, and they have found that 1.5% of those EVs have required a battery replacement, excluding battery recalls on the Hyundai Kona and Chevy Bolt. Within that data, the Model S and the Nissan Leaf, both a couple of older electric vehicles a little bit earlier on, those were a little bit higher, probably closer to the 4 or 5% range, but replacement rates coming down over time, whether that is because the vehicles are newer and just don't need replacements, or because the technology has gotten better, the process has improved, or likely a combination of both. If we look at the Tesla Model Y and the Tesla Model 3 here, you can barely even see a sliver. From Recurrent's data, that looks to be well under a 1% rate. So hopefully data like that can help inspire confidence in EVs and especially in Tesla EVs. They also took a look at battery degradation, but we won't spend much time on that because it's going off of displayed range, and there can be other factors that contribute to the range that is being displayed, and that can vary across manufacturers. But in general, their degradation data matches degradation data that we have seen from Tesla before that we've talked about, where you're seeing a bigger hit up front, maybe 10% or so, but then that degradation leveling off significantly as time goes by. All right, last couple of items for today. I had mentioned last week that Bloomberg is going to be updating their Tesla survey from 2019. It looks like they have opened up participation for any owners that would like to. You just need a vehicle identification number. So if you do want to participate in that survey, I'll put the link to that down in the description. And then lastly, we do have an update from Lucid. They announced today in an SEC filing that they intend to lay off about 1,300 employees, or about 18% of their workforce. They expect to complete this in the second quarter, and they say that the US workforce will see reductions in nearly every organization and level. So wish the best to those employees. Obviously though, Lucid needs to get a handle on its cost structure. That is a step, but they'll still have a long ways to go. Alright, that is where we'll wrap it up for today then. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast, and we'll see you tomorrow for the Wednesday, March 29th episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.